Welcome to the Evolve Beyond Limits podcast. I'm your host, Stacy Geisel. This podcast is dedicated to helping you create a life that sets your soul on fire. I believe that is truly possible for everybody, but you have to be willing to do a few things. You have to be willing to let go of your past conditioning. You have to be willing to break free from societal norms. And you have to be willing to get really curious about your life and how you can start to look at it differently. Each week, we will hear stories from people who have done exactly this. People who chose to disrupt the life path they were on, go against the grain, and share the lessons and perspective shifts they had to make along the way. Every episode is committed to not only inspiring you and connecting you with other amazing humans, but actually giving you the tools you need to use this information in your own life so that you continue to evolve and reconnect with your highest self. Are you ready? Let's have some fun. Welcome back to the Evolve Beyond Limits podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. And this week, I am speaking with Mally Paquette. She is one of my mentors and a renowned Sedona medicine woman. She shares with us that when we are seeking clarity, all we need to do is listen within because the answer is already within us. Mally reminds us that it's never too late to make a change because every single breath in our life is precious. Life is always changing and people are seeking that ultimate happiness, but we need to adapt and embrace these changes in order to create that in our own lives. Mally's entire life has been deeply entrenched in the indigenous cultures. Her spiritual roots are embedded with Native Americans. She founded a nonprofit organization, NAAP, to serve the Lakota on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. For a decade, she's studied the Lakota traditions, and in 2002, she was adopted into the Sioux tribe and cherishes this unique honor. Mally teaches us through chakra psychology and her intuitive gifts that she listens to the deeper bodies and can translate one's physical ailments, offering a therapeutic new path to optimal health. She delivers healings through the tradition of yoga therapy and sound vibration. Mally has been such a gift to me, and I know that she's going to be such a gift to everybody who gets to listen to this. She is truly somebody that has changed my life for the better, and I can't wait to share her wisdom with you. So let's get started. Okay, Mally, I could not be more excited to have you on the show because you're literally one of my favorite humans in the entire world. So thank you for being here.
You're so cute. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited too.
Yes. And before we get into the nitty gritty of all of it, I like the listeners to get to know you a little bit with just some, because we're going to go deep, but these are just more some surface level questions to keep things easy. So first, where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Sedona, Arizona, and I have Awakenings Yoga Studio where I do all my spiritual work out of. So it's super hot out here, so I'm happy to be inside talking to you.
Yeah, it is. It's hot. I spent, when was I there? Mid-June, and it was 100, but I don't know. I loved it. I loved it.
I know this too shall pass. So we'll just see what.
So when I was staying with you, so this is going to be a funny question because when I was staying with you, I looked over at your book wall and I was like, oh my gosh, and I thought I think I read a lot, but this might be a really hard question. So just the first one that comes to mind, what is your favorite book?
Oh my gosh, that is such a hard question. Well, the answer to that would definitely be a book called The Knowledge Book, but it's out of Turkey, so it's not going to be very helpful for any listeners because you kind of can't get it anymore. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I kind of pulled a blank there a little bit. But if you took that book away that is challenging to get or maybe understand, my absolute favorite book to make it easy is The Prophet.
Okay. I haven't read that. I just started reading The Camino, which you recommended to me. Yeah. And actually, I gave it to my dad first because he just like any book I give him, he loves to read. And so that book blew his mind. And so I was like, I can't wait to get into this. And it really has been, I'm not through it yet, but it's been amazing. So, um, it's very in alignment with where I think I'm going in certain aspects. So just funny how the world works, but not that funny. Okay.
Yeah.
So where you've traveled a lot of places, where has been like your favorite place so far?
Um, oh gosh, I got a two-prong answer again. It's hard. I definitely would say in this country, Alaska, and I'm headed to Alaska in a week. And out of the country, it is definitely South America, where the amazing teachers of mine, the Kogi, reside. So little bit of a two-forked answer.
Okay. So we're going to get into the Kogis and all of that. So I'm excited that you kind of brought that up. What is
Okay.
one thing that's still on your bucket list?
To go to, hands down, this one's easy. Look at that. Hands down, to go to Australia and spend the Aborigines.
Okay, so we're gonna have to. We'll talk about that later because I need to go to Northern Australia. So like I've always wanted to go to Australia too.
Yeah.
All right, so this is always funny. I just think this question is kind of funny, but it's like, what did you want to be when you were growing up? Like when you were a kid?
Well, oddly enough, I I really always thought I would be an artist, and I have done a lot of artwork that I've gotten away from now. And then other than that, like when I was kind of in my teenage years, I actually wanted to be a yoga teacher. And so I taught yoga, but then I kind of left that behind as a job or a career. And it wasn't until probably I was 40 that I came back to it and then have made it kind of a career for the last 25 years. So I guess that's good that I went back to it.
Right? That's so funny. I think
Yeah.
that that's really cool that you were able to kind of come back to that. And for anybody who's listening and can hear Miss Karma in the background, that is Mally's pup who wants to be on the interview too, which is fine. Okay, so last question. What was one of your favorite things to do when you were a kid?
Climb trees. What an interesting, I haven't thought of that. Like it was always trees.
Well, I could see that in you.
Yeah. Got it now going, wow, that's amazing.
I think it's funny because we sometimes forget like the things that were so simple that we loved to do when we were little. So, um, you know, and you have that connection with the trees now. You're just not all up in them.
It's much safer.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, let me set the scene for everybody who's listening on how we met because I couldn't like if I didn't believe in like some sort of divine intervention before, then I did in this moment because we were putting together press pause for last year, which was in Sedona, and we were looking for a yoga instructor. And I don't even know if I've ever told you this, but I feel like we actually picked somebody else. Because I had like these three choices, and all we had to go by was like the website. And so I think we picked someone and then like they couldn't do it. And so then I was like, okay, like I went to your website and there's this picture of you and it looks like you're holding like some sort of weird hair thing in your hand. And I'm like, okay, like, you know what? When in Rome or Sedona, this is what we're going to roll with.
Oh, so funny.
So fast forward, Mally shows up and I don't even think we actually like we did very little yoga because once we pulled like some cards, like the one thing that I've learned from you is I've learned so much. We'll talk about that. But one of the things is that sometimes you just have to, most of the time, you just have to go with the flow and you like can't force a direction. But what really attracted to like me to you was the fact that you were this spiritual person who came in. And then the moment that you said the word fuck, I was like, yes, like this is my type of like, there's something about her. So I knew that I needed to connect with you more. So I followed you out to your car. I asked you to be my mentor and the rest is history.
It is. Rest is history. And that's the piece of divine intervention, that when we just get out of our own way and go with our gut feeling, or our plans in life change totally drastically, it's spirit protecting us and spirit guiding us to the right people, the right situations, the right places. And so thanks for giving that a chance, because you're a treasure in my life now too, in a big way. So
it's so much fun it's fun to come. And I think you're so right in the fact that, like life actually can be a lot easier than we make it, but we just can't fight it so hard. Right.
Absolutely. And this next 3 weeks of August, that's really imperative to tap into. So it's great that you brought it up, because there's going to be a lot of unexpected events, and we think we're going straight and suddenly there's a right turn. And that's the energy for the next 3 weeks. So this is perfect to tell people to trust.
Yes. Oh, I love that. So take that with you and kind of allow August to go and like take you where it needs to go, I guess. So
absolutely.
Mally, you have taught me so much, and which I am just beyond grateful for. But to me, you're like this female version of like the Dos Equis, man. Like you're the most interesting person I have ever met. Like I literally don't even know where to start, but here, let's start here. Like you were a yoga teacher, and then you kind of went away from it. And then like the spirituality that you have, I know that it wasn't always in the forefront. So what kind of started to lead you down that road?
Well, my parents grew up in Wyoming. And so even though I lived in Florida, I was always in Wyoming every summer. And my real connection to spiritualism began kind of unconsciously, because to me, it was just life. And being at my grandparents' ranches in Wyoming, I was really subject to a lot of Native Americans and sweat lodges and the ways of indigenous people. And to me, that was just like, I thought everybody had that. We all think that everyone's having the same experience when we're young. And then when I went away from it in late teens and 20s, then you get married and you start a family and you do all those things that then become forefront to that. And I think that people hit their about 30 with their first Saturn return that ties into the astrology, and you start to reflect on life. And it was at that point that I went back, reconnected with indigenous, and actually began to start to help on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, and then formed a nonprofit that for 7 years I pretty much lived on and off the reservation. And then once that experience happened, kind of in my early 30s, there was just kind of no going back. And it just kept evolving kind of every 7 years to 10 years with a new chapter of indigenous. So that's kind of how that funny journey of my spiritualism just kept gaining more and more depth. But it was really, I think, in a cellular way, when I was a kid. So we're just such products of our environments, but we run away from them sometimes.
Yeah, that's so, it is interesting. And I love that you said, like, we just assume that everybody's having the same experience that we are, because that like couldn't be more true. We really do. And so I think that it's fun to see that you kind of came back to that. And what do you feel like was, I don't know, what do you think was the biggest lesson you kind of learned in like at that age of 30? Like you talked about the Saturn return, and we've talked about this. And for anybody who's listening, Mally taught me this, is kind of between the ages of like 28 and 32, we have our first Saturn return where like we're kind of hit with our karma a little bit, and we have to deal with it. And if we ignore it, then it comes back, right? It keeps coming back. So what do you think was like that karmic lesson that you were learning at that moment?
That I had a choice of how I could go forward and live my life. And that I had a breath of empowerment, of finding really who I was. And my life at that time, like at 28, 29, was not at all where I wanted it to be. And so in my personal life, I had had a huge learning curve all through, well, up until that point in my life, really from childhood on, but a real learning curve of this is not a healthy, expansive, really supportive relationship. And so I chose to get divorced. And that piece of taking my power back, because after years of trying to make something work, it was very clear that it wasn't supposed to work. But yet it served a great purpose because it put me through some very, very, very challenging times. And I discovered who I was and who I didn't want to be. And so with that, my Saturn return of 30 really pushed me forward. And I had just had a newborn baby. You remember I mentioned, and, that's a big catalyst because I knew my environment was not healthy or what I wanted for that child. So for me, I chose to get divorced, sell my car, ride a bicycle for years with this kid. And, we were on this grand adventure, but what I claimed was my freedom for the first time. And, even though there were a lot of tiring, long days, I was happy, truly happy for the first time in my life.
I think I love that story because I think it just shows that sometimes the most difficult decisions, the most are like the most courageous decisions, the ones that are really going to launch us to where we need to be, are the scariest, right? Like they're the most uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And, we just have to take that leap of faith, because I think the thing that I have also witnessed, I turned 65 in a couple of weeks myself, right after you have your wonderful 33rd birthday. And that courage is easier to find every time you tap into it, because we're guided and protected. And we're really, when something's not working and it's not in flow, we're really supposed to look for other avenues, and the doors will open.
Wow, what a great lesson, because I think that there's so often that we're taught in our culture to kind of suck it up, right? Like just push through, right. Like life is supposed to be hard. Like that's kind of what we're taught, in that the path of least resistance is usually the one we're supposed to be on, but we find like we're so fixated on being like going through this one door that we just can't seem to look for the open ones that are all around us. So I love that.
It's more that to me, the way I would put it is we're culturally programmed that we have limitations. And when you find a couple courageous moves in your life and you take these leaps of faith, you realize you're limitless and that there are a million opportunities, not just one. And I think that's something that for me, sometimes as I've aged and have this number attached to me to a certain degree, I wouldn't trade that core power for anything, because life gets better. And we're culturally taught that it doesn't get better as we age, but it really does.
I'm going to take your word for it, because you are, like I said, just such a inspiration to me. I think that even in the short time of knowing you, you have given me a lot of courage just to what's the worst case scenario? I ask myself that all the time. Like there's not a whole lot that can knock us down and, to the point where we can't get back up. So you mentioned that South America is one of your favorite places because you were down there with the Kogi tribe. Like, okay, how did this even, what the heck?
From the South Dakota Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, I grew a nonprofit. I don't know, I can't even remember. The award I got after a couple years was growing a nonprofit to the largest corporate level in that area, just through passion and a lot of work, basically, and a lot of help from, it's what I was supposed to be doing. And then I I don't want to say became known, but within indigenous worlds, I had kind of made a name for myself a little bit. And when I later came to Sedona, I had an inroads to so many indigenous people here through, I didn't know this had happened. You don't know about these little webs. I just kept being busy and living life. And that let me connect with so many of the medicine people here in Sedona that opened a lot of worlds. And a guy that became a friend of mine, his name is Adam Yellowbird, had been going to South America for a while. And I had heard of the Kogi through Drunvalo Melchizedek's books that I'd read, that they were the awakened beings on this planet, and they made no contact with the Western world, etc. So I knew who the Kogi were, but I certainly I never dreamed this would open up for me. And this man, Adam, had been working to invite and bring a couple of Kogi down the mountain, get them passports and visas and whatnot, and bring them to Sedona to do a week of talks and lectures. And the whole thing kind of blew up on him because it was like 700 tickets sold around the globe overnight. Because once people realized that they were going to have an opportunity to make contact with these indigenous and listen to them. So he suddenly had an event on his hands for 700 people. And the story goes, he was down with another medicine man friend of mine, that they were smoking a pipe and putting their prayers, because he was rather overwhelmed. How am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And the other medicine man said, I know exactly who you need to meet. Then my journey began, and I met with them. They called me, and I met with them here in Sedona, and really took over the event, running the event for him. And I really at that point thought that's all I was going to do. That was an honor, and I was super excited that I would have some contact with them. And then at the closing ceremony of that event, they came to me through the translator and invited me to South America the following week. My husband about had a heart attack. And I went a few weeks later with my daughter, Leslie, and a journey began that they already saw how it was going to play out, because they say the Kogi see who you've been, who you are, and who you're going to become. And a 10-year journey began with them to help them find a way to reclaim their ancestral land for prayers for humanity and the earth. So it's kind of a long answer, but those were the dots that connected.
Well, I love that, because I think that it's when those dots connect that's what makes the story, and it makes it so interesting, because we can't, have you ever seen what was coming? Right?
I don't think my answer to that would be, I feel what's coming.
Mm.
And so I know there's this gut feeling when things are going to really change. And I do tap into the astrology. So maybe I have that as a churning motion, that this is a time to pay attention. This is a time to take more time and listen to yourself, a time to not be overly busy, things like that. And then to me, I think that spirit just begins to speak to you, whether that's voices you hear or visions you see. Actually, it's interesting you're asking me that question, because this week has been a very pivotal week astrologically. Sirius, which is the planet that flooded the Nile every year. This is a time of fertility, thus the creativity. And I haven't slept for 2 nights. And I know this is a pivotal time to listen. Now, trust me, I went to bed last night and really wanted to sleep. I was kind of tired. But when I'm woken up and really feel this churning going on within me, as much as I want to lay there, I just get up and start to putter a little and get out my journal. And then It's daybreak before I know what's happened, and I've got a whole flood of ideas and ideas about what to change next. So I don't see it coming like that, but it's listening to that inner rumble to just sit and pay attention.
Mm. Oh my gosh, I love that you're saying that, because something that and this is a lesson that has been hard for me to learn, is that I don't get to determine when clarity is coming. Right? Like I feel like I have that same feeling and I'm sure a lot of people have this, they just aren't as tapped into it. And so if you feel these gut feelings, these different things, like slow down and listen. But you also don't get to say, like, today I'm going to listen and today the answer is going to come. Like, you have to be disciplined to keep showing up, keep listening. And like, when it's time, clarity will come, but you don't get to determine that.
Yeah, and I think the thing, and again, in our culture and in lives, and especially I think in women's lives, maybe more than men, even though that might be a little bit biased, we don't carve out the time. And we have to carve out that time to be able to connect with nature and voices and really the unseen realms. Because what we see is such a small part of what's happening. It's when we close our eyes and we go to our inner landscape that we are able to pick up on so many more things because there's no distractions. And those are the teachings of yoga called pratyahara, to have sensory withdrawal and then go within yourself to listen and feel and hear the answers. So that's the main purpose of a practice, a spiritual practice, a yoga practice. And those pieces in my life for now 25 years, it's a rare day I would not find my mat and either do my yoga, teach yoga, etc. And that's the time out for me every day. And I don't get answers every day, but if I keep going back to that practice, when I'm supposed to get answers and clarity, it's there for you.
Yep. Oh my gosh. I love that. So when you were living, or like you were going back and forth, so 10 years you kind of spent with the Kogis. I can't even imagine how much you learned in that. But is there one like big thing that you were like, that just kind of blew you away, or like you came away with from that experience?
Gosh, there's so many, but I want to be specific. And that's what my next card deck is going to be, that I get to start next week after a couple days pause. It's already starting, but it's a wisdom deck of the Kogi teachings and using the photography in all these sacred places to share teachings like you're asking right now, that are actually down to such simplicity. The most complex things, what they're able to do is bring it down to such simplicity. And the one that I'm hearing right now to home in on, that was something that kind of changed the channel in my life, is when I would take groups over there and we would sit for days and we would hike and go to these sacred places. And then we would sit just like you and I are, kind of in a forum where we asked questions. They would get us going and then we would ask questions. And they asked this group, what feeds you? And not to judge anybody, but some people began answering because it was just hard to understand the depth of what they were looking for. And somebody would say, "Oh, I love my organic food." Okay. And they would churn this down to, that's what feeds your physical body, but what feeds your soul? And when we realize that we are energetic beings in a physical body, food keeps your physical body going. It's actually less necessary the older you get. A lot of people are unfamiliar with that fact. But what feeds your soul is what in your life is giving you beauty. And so from that point on, I really began to pay more attention to that. So is it the sunset? Is it having roses on your table all the time? Is it gifting yourself something? Really paying attention to the present moment. So they refine teachings like that of what feeds you, but what feeds your soul, because you can eat to simplify it, you can eat all the organic food in the world, but if your home environment is a bit toxic or not loving, and you live in a place that you really don't love, your soul is going to be depleted. And it's that soul that can be fed by making more refined decisions. And then you can eat whatever the heck you want and transmute it because you're happy and you're fulfilled. Does that give you an
Yes. And I think that this is such an amazing lesson for everybody that's listening, because it's whenever, like, I work with a lot of women, I have a feeling that that's going to start to expand to men as well. But it is that whole, like, if I even ask them the question, like, what do you need? They don't know how to answer it. They've never asked themselves that. And I think it's exactly what you're saying is like, what feeds your soul? And I always try to and I think I learned this from you, that like you can be extremely grateful for everything that you have in your life and it not be feeding your soul and that you still have to change it.
right? Absolutely. Because each person doesn't want to necessarily feel it or look at it, because that would force them to choose to change. So instead, people tend to it starts with one little veil of numbness and it grows into layers and layers of just numbing out, because it's hard to find the courage to make those changes like we spoke of. But when you really sit all by yourself and you take all those components that are the distractions out of your life, how happy and full do you feel? And that's just simply a choice. And it has nothing to do with age, nothing. And I think that's another compromise that I think a lot of women make, that they just think it's too late to make a change, or I'm just going to stay with the status quo. And every single moment, every breath of our life is precious. We don't know when something's going to happen. And, that's where you asked me in the beginning about when I got back to yoga when I was 40. And I was shaken up by two of my best friends that were a little bit older than me. They were 45, 47, and they both died of cancer, and very, very quickly. And that was a gift of them choosing to go to the other side at that time. Of course, I wish they didn't get sick and I wish they were here. But by that path that the two of them took, it made me stop at 40, early 40s, and go, that could happen to me. Am I happy? Am I doing what I want? How am I using the hours in my day? And that's when I kind of did a whole career change and flip and went back to simplifying my life, trusting that the yoga would take me where I was supposed to go. I didn't think that's where I was going to land, but it was just the journey. And then as that evolved, I had changed and more avenues opened up to me. So we get these gifts that don't look like a gift, but they really are a gift. We're also interconnected to each other.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think like it's that, like, what I'm hearing you say is that you have to be willing to just take one step forward. Like it doesn't have to be this all or nothing thing. We just have to be willing to take one like courageous step forward, and you have no idea where that's going to lead you. But it's not about where you're going. It's just about being able to kind of live in that moment. But I do know, and for anybody who's had that feeling, like when you're not doing what you're here to do. When you're out of alignment from what you're being called to do and what you're kind of forcing yourself to do. And it's this energetic feeling that kind of doesn't go away. Like it's this gut feeling. You just, yeah, I don't know. Like you said, there was a point in your life where you were like finally actually happy. And I don't know that many people have actually experienced that.
Yeah, but the other thing too, I mean, I feel blessed that I have these super happy moments in my life. They're not all perfect, believe me. I have my valleys too. But a great example of what we're talking about is literally happened last night. Just like having this interview today has been lined up in the sense that I made some changes with my business and the studio and schedule wise and doing these cards and whatnot, because this is the summer of change in all of our lives as humanity evolves. But I knew it wasn't refined yet. And it wasn't until last night that staying up and journaling and thinking, I realized there was still a stone. Like I see our lives as going down this river, and sometimes we're in the flow and we're just carried on. And then there are other times where we kind of have gotten a little washed ashore and we are trying to get back in the river. And how we get to the middle of the river is like these stones, all different shapes and sizes. And some of the stones are a little tippy and we have to be a little careful and go a little slower so we don't have a crash and burn thing in the river. But last night I had this clarity that there's another piece of my business I need to kind of drop. It's come to completion. And I can't make space for the new until I drop this other piece. And even though it may, sadden a few people, there's others out there that I'm going to reach in a different way. And so it's this constant tweaking. We never completely arrive. We might arrive on that rock for a little while, but I think a lot of people keep looking for the ultimate happiness and they want it to stay like that. But life is change. And if you're not constantly changing yourself, your life, and recreating yourself, you're only surviving and not thriving. So it's that change that we have to embrace.
It's one thing Mally said to me one time, and I love this because I don't know how many times I've said it since you told me, but you said, and I like tell people, I'm like, my mentor one time said that like there's a reason why like the sunset doesn't last forever, and that's because we would never get anything done. Like I love that because you're right. It's the one thing that I have like always admired about you is that your ability to like trust and surrender to life, and not because everything is going great or everything is going your way, but because you have found this way to like truly enjoy or at least just tolerate the ebb and flow that life is. So where do you feel like that came from?
Oh gosh, that is fairly easy to answer. I think it actually unconsciously began like in my home life that was not the worst home life by any means. There was, in my case, there was no sexuality issues compromised. There was a lot of gifts from the stability of finance in the beginning that then disappeared, as you know, my personal story. But it was really surrendering to life changing so much as I grew up, of my parents having a real sense of security that they were able to give us, to then through my father's, God bless him, through his alcoholism, my family went from kind of riches to rags instead of rags to riches, and that piece of life, I actually am so grateful for, because I kind of grew up learning two completely opposite ends of spectrum, to have things very luxurious and be given those things, and then all of a sudden not know where your next meal is going to come from, and not know how you were going to get food or pay the bills and whatnot. And that swing of things, I think, ingrained a resistance in me that I just didn't expect. And I knew you had to work for life and you needed discipline in life. And then again, at that Saturn return piece of looking for a relationship out there to fill something within me and a relationship to bring stability to me, and then having that not be something that gave it to me. It was really digging into in my 30s, that I have to go create this for myself. And that was that empowerment state at that point. And then, like we spoke about, Stacy, you get your Saturn return. Saturn is the big disciplinary planet and the teaching planet. So we learn our lessons. And when I turned 60, really, so now go back to 56, 57, 58, as I was in the beginning of what's called my second Saturn return, I had a whole nother wave of lessons. That was my big surrender, because that newborn child that I chose to get a divorce at 28, 29 had also become an addict and an alcoholic. And I had been through the ringer with him for pretty much his whole life. So that whole 30-year section, he was my teacher to surrender. Because if you have a relationship with anyone in life who suffers from addiction and deep, deep wounds, you have to surrender. You get them help. And we got him a lot of help. And again, it takes tapping into unconditional love, that whatever the story is, whatever the labels are, you continue to open up and love this person, no matter how the story's turning out. And at that point in my second Saturn return, Christopher had had an accident and went into prison. And he gets out of prison this year after 7 years. And so that's another wave of surrender, of my only job as that fellow human being / mom is to keep not enabling him, but keep loving him and let him know that he is still someone I will champion for. He has his own lessons to learn, but it's through those huge pieces of life where we have to surrender, because life is going to flow where it's going to flow. And we are not in control. Something way bigger than us is. And he today is in a very different place, that without these experiences, I could never have taken him and gotten him. And I'm in a completely different place because of him, and a story that we obviously were supposed to share. So everybody ends up where they're supposed to be. And we have to just know that we've done our best, find the courage, and keep loving each other no matter what the labels are. And just keep waking up every day and trying to do it a little bit better.
Mm. Yeah, that I know, like with most of the people, so many people that I work with, and myself included, it's that surrender piece. That's like, life would be so simple if we would just quit trying to control it, and if we could just roll with what it throws at us. But it's hard.
It is hard. But, I think when people do it, whether it's one foot in front of the other, one stone, each stone up the river, we get better and better at it. Life is a practice. And that, again, comes with, as we journey along life and we are paying close attention and not numbing out, we learn to have such an amazing toolbox with us, or a backpack full of tricks. And those tools, then we navigate with grace. And to me, that's really what the journey of life is about, is to come into that grace and flow and just allow. I have no clue what this afternoon will be like, but I think I've got a plan, but it won't really, if I'm surrendering, it'll actually turn out to be different. And for me, over the years, different always turns out to be better. So I just go with it now.
Oh, I love that. Different always turns out to be better because it's
Yeah,
so true. It's
it
so
is.
true. And it's funny because actually the other night, the listeners who are listening, like you guys know, I'm an open book, and I was crying in bed about something, nothing that happened in bed, just it happened to be in bed, and Andrew looked at me and he's like, "I just feel like you've been crying a lot in the last couple of weeks," like, and I was like. I think for the first time in my life, I'm not numbing that aspect because like we all want to feel the joy, the happiness, the this, the that, but we don't want to feel the sadness and the like the other things or like the, whatever it happens to be, the frustrations that we're going through. And what I'm learning is like you can't have the one without the other. And I'm learning to truly, I heard this quote one time and it was that like wisdom is like rainwater. They both collect in down places. And like, I just thought that I'm like, that really has been coming up for me a lot lately of, I know that when I let myself feel like I feel the down, I allow it to just like, because our emotions are there to teach us something, whether they be whatever we label them as. Like I've learned to not label them as bad or good. It's just how I'm feeling in the moment. And it guides me to exactly where I need to be. But if I let myself feel it, there's always some spark of like huge insight, wisdom, something that comes from it. So I just don't have to, I don't feel the need to like, I think for a long time I tried to be so hard, right? And I didn't want to be vulnerable and
Right.
show those tears and the different things. But now it's like, you know what? Like I'm opening up to feel it because it helps.
Yeah, at a very low spot in my life, early on with my son, my mom was still alive at that time. And I went over to her apartment and said, I just can't quit crying. I can't, I'm trying to embrace this. And she just looked at me and she just said, you're in this really dark storm right now. But Mally, if you don't have rain and storms in your life, you're never going to find rainbows. And that really stuck with me every time that I would have this wave of emotion and water would leak out of me because that's what our emotions do. Now I understand through yoga and sacred teachings, that's what really allows us to come back into balance. We're made of water. We're supposed to flow with water. So when we are teary and feeling that emotion, it's really when we're healing and reharmonizing and rebalancing our life. And then it's through that water that we actually go through the gateway of a rainbow. And everything's different. And we're ready to start all over again. So it's the refresher, but we're taught to suppress our emotions. We're taught to hide our emotions. And especially for men in this case, it's that they have to put on this big facade. And if people could just soften and merge with the emotion, we're not meant to get rid of it. We're meant to merge with shadow. We're meant to merge with emotion. And then we embrace it and it passes much more quickly.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be again quite so hard when we can
Right.
actually embrace it. Um So one thing you and I joke all the time because we are again, more things that I've learned from you, but we're very high fire, right? Like we have this like we love transformation. We love to help other people have transformations, but it can leave us pretty burned out if we're not careful and there's high fire is good to an extent, right? And so but one of the things that you taught me was this might have been as you can see, I've learned a lot from Melly and it's not over. But is this whole like I always say like I love you because I like Melly, I can call her and be like, I'm really struggling with something. And she'll be like, well, maybe you need to chill the fuck out. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. Like she's just so like she's like me. She's so brutally honest that it's like I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I do. I'm like, maybe it's not everyone else. But
Right.
one thing that you said is you said, Stace, you can do and I think you got this from somebody. So I'll let you tell the story. But what you said is that you said everything can be done in one of two ways. You can use a sledgehammer or you can use a feather. Can you just talk a little bit about those two things and how that maybe like where that showed up in your life?
Yeah, it was a huge lesson for me that I still have to remind myself of at times, because you and I, Stacey, have the gift of so much passion. If we're going to get involved in something, we're involved 200%, not just 100%. And so then that excitement carries us away, and a fire is transforming everything. But this wonderful teacher of mine here in Sedona that I started to study with and help and work with 15 years ago said to me, you know, did it ever occur to you to be a feather instead of a sledgehammer? And I was immediately so insulted because I was just like, that's not a very nice thing to insinuate. But the point of this is that it was the beginning of me looking at things with more patience, and doing something quickly is not always the best way and the right answer. And so when you are sledgehammer going about things in your life, you kind of leave debris, and there's a wake that affects all the people around you. Whereas if you just went about it a little slower and used a feather, it's going to take a little longer, and it may not have the timely results that our personalities would like, but we're not going to leave a wake, and we're not going to leave any damage behind. And it's just a matter of going a little more slowly, a little more present, and realizing that everything has its own timing. It's not our timing. And so that was a big lesson for me to get. And even like last night, with very clear decisions that I'm going to go ahead and shift in my business, I'm 100% clear. The old me would have wanted to get a notice out by noon today. And that feather person is wise enough now to realize I want to think about what would be the best timing for everyone in and clients and my friends and my family. So you don't want to leave something like that totally open-ended. But for me, what I do is I pick like 2 dates that I might make that change effective. And then I wait to see which one feels better within a day or two or within a week. So that's going about it more like a feather as opposed to a sledgehammer.
Mm. Yes. And I need that reminder often. And I think that where it really, I mean, it helped me in a lot of areas, but even with building my own business. And I know that some of the people, some of the listeners have businesses, and this is something I've really tried to help more people with, is this whole idea that like we put this ridiculous invisible timeline on all these things that we want to do. And like, yeah, there are definitely people who they are crushing it right from the outside in. Maybe they're making tons of money. It's happening very quickly, all the things. And then for what I had to look at was like, but at what cost? Right. And that's where that sledgehammer is like the question that I always ask myself is like, could I do that? Probably. Do I have the passion and excitement to do that? Yeah. But at what cost? And that cost for me is not enjoying the being in the present moment as much, not getting out to go surf and be in nature and travel and do all the things that I want to do. And might it take a little bit longer to grow a business that way? Yep. But I'm okay. And like, I have finally, I trust that I will be taken care of. And so when the money needs to come, it's going to come. And I just don't have to, I mean, this is a constant reminder. You guys don't like, I'm not, trust me, it's a daily thing I'm telling myself, but it is like, but I think it's been just a really powerful lesson for me to say, you know what, like, the timeline really isn't mine to begin with. And so I'm going to choose to live my life and build a business and not have to choose between the two of those things. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's a constant reminder, and it's the messages are always very clear if we are paying attention. You get the affirmations, you get the messages, and um, we're always guided. Like I said earlier, with the messages are there, but are we numb and avoiding them, or are we really paying attention? And that's how we get so off track, is when we just numb out. And so staying alive and checking in, not just once a month, once a week, once a day, check in every hour. Make a journal and ask yourself, how am I doing? And you're going to see this pattern probably of a particular time in your day that if you're unhappy, you kind of zone out. And if you're thriving and you're really happy, you're happy to go to bed at night, but you're so excited to get up and see what the day is going to bring. And it makes me sad sometimes to realize how few people live like that.
Yeah. Oh man, that we can sit on that for a while, but it's true. Like it's just, and I always think about how different of a world we would live in if everybody was excited to, because like the change starts with us, right? Like the change doesn't start with changing everybody else. It starts with like us being able to wake up and feel that like thriving and just excitement for life, because that I believe is how life is meant to be. So if we could all do that just a little bit more, the world would definitely start to shift in beautiful ways. And it is.
Yeah. Society has programmed us to change our material world that we're amidst and live in, and then our world will make us feel better. But nothing's changing on the inside. And it's actually the esoteric and sacred teachings are just the opposite. The outer world isn't going to have a lasting effect until we make the change on the inside. Then when we make the change on the inside, we're actually changing our vibratory frequency and our energetics. And then the whole world changes and it's effortless. So it's really about having spiritual coaching, having a spiritual practice, because if you want life to suddenly be full of magic and riches, you've got to work the magic. And the magic is inside, not outside. If you want a life of riches that could disappear in a heartbeat, then you're not working internally, you're working externally. And that again is sad, because most people are not doing it proactively. They do it when there's a crisis. Somebody dies, somebody's in deep trouble, their relationship is in demise, or they lose their job, or they get a horrible medical diagnosis. All those things are gifts. And it's really just taking you to an internal journey. But it would be really great if we could teach kids to grow up proactively doing this. And then there's going to be a heck of a lot less drama in the world. So that's really how our world is supposed to be in a nutshell. But we're just not taught that.
Right. Yeah. No, we're taught the total opposite. And it's just a good reminder. And I think that even for the people listening, sometimes we can think that we are disciplined or dedicated, but I know a lot of people who their spiritual practice is there, but only when they feel like they need it. Right. Kind of like you're saying. And it might not even be this drastic thing, right? Like that's like the universe or the God or whatever you want to say, tapping us on the shoulder and then hitting us in the head with the 2x4 when like those big things happen. But it's like, if like you're saying, if you can be disciplined to, every day showing up for yourself and doing that inner work, then you might not have to get hit in the head with the 2x4. Like it doesn't have to be so drastic.
Absolutely. And, someone put it to me one day when I was, actually it was when I was approaching that divorce. And this wonderful therapist said to me, to give him credit too, he said, your coffee cup is just full. And I go, I hate coffee. He goes, whatever, Mally. But the point is, you're full. And if you create that practice of something every day to take a little cork out the bottom, it's going to constantly be overflowing. So what you do with a daily practice of, maybe that's a walk, maybe it's meditation, maybe it is a yoga practice or exercise in some form. The quieter and more still you can be, the more evolved and the clearer your answers will be. But you got to start somewhere. I used to run marathons, so no criticism. So the piece of the puzzle is, life is going to pour that coffee cup a new dose of coffee every day. And if it doesn't have the plug out the bottom, it's going to constantly be overflowing. And then our physical body is going to suffer. Our mental body is going to suffer. Our emotions are going to suffer. And the spiritual piece of our life that should be the most important one, however you choose to walk that, is kind of not there. So by taking that time, all three of those energetic bodies begin to start to balance and have a dance and a relationship. And then there's still room for the spiritualism to develop. So it always worked really well for me to go, where is my coffee cup and how full am I? And there's your answer to find that balance. And, of course, maybe it's a day we're traveling and we skip one day. But boy, life will become so much richer and more in this flow we want if we can possibly do it 5 out of 7 days, 6 out of 7 days. You get to a point where you really have very few days you're not finding that time, because now your passion has shifted to honoring yourself, and you're worthy enough to take that time for yourself. I mean, every single person here could find an hour for themselves, but we don't prioritize ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that it's actually really, really difficult for me to miss so here's for everybody listening. Here's like something that has evolved over time. I used to be able to I couldn't miss a workout because but that wasn't really coming from a very good place. That was coming from a very different place, but that was kind of my discipline. Right. And now I remember when it started to shift for me, when I was like, if I had a choice between getting a workout in the morning or doing my like meditation and my journaling, I will pick my meditation and journaling every single time, because I actually know that is what's going to catapult me into not having a reactive day and having a day where like I can surrender and trust. And like you said, it's like, it'll just end up better. If I can allow that to happen. So things do shift. And a couple of years ago, I would have laughed if you would have said that. I'd be like, no, I'm definitely going to work out, but no, not anymore.
Yeah. And you have to come up with the way to do that for yourself. And for me, with high energy like you, once I'm literally up and I come into my house or kitchen, the day has begun and it's hard to go back and grab it again. So for me, I don't really love early morning, but I learned to set the alarm an hour before I really want to start my day. So I get up and I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth. I don't do anything more than that though. And I come get a drink to put back by my bed table. And then I've got 1 hour to stay in bed and not allow myself to get up into any chores or anything. And maybe that's just lay in bed and close your eyes and think, or see what you hear. Or to me, that's really for a while a meditative state in the morning. And then I'll sit up and journal or write some ideas. Or if I'm not feeling that motivated, have a stack of books by your bed and pick one or pick a card. But it's that hour of how you start the day. I think a lot of people feel like what you and I are wanting them to do or suggesting they do has to have this formality to it. And the key is once our day begins, the odds are going to go down that we're going to fit this in. So if you just set that time where you really are giving yourself this luxurious time to just lay in bed or sit in bed, that's where it's a good beginner way to do it. And you may always do it like that. I know it's continued for me and it works in that manner.
I love that. I think that's great, great advice because like make it work. And I will say too that I can understand, it's like we like Mally said, and I know that we agree on this, is like we want to be excited to get up in the morning. And I think for me, I've always been a morning person, but I know like my morning routine, my meditation, my card pull, my journaling, like the things, reading, and I'm like you, like I don't have to do all of those things. I just pick whatever feels best for me in that moment. But it's about like the fact that I always am more energized after I do it. And it doesn't matter how little sleep I got, anything I like, that doesn't matter. So yeah, my challenge to anybody listening is like, if you like get up 30 minutes early, and just see, like experiment with it, and see how you feel.
It's that you're finding and allowing devotion to come into your life. And devotion to me is such a special word that when we find devotion to ourselves, even if it's for 15 minutes to 30 minutes, or maybe you can give yourself a whole hour, it doesn't really matter. It's going to maneuver with whatever you've got going in the day. But again, it's bringing in that discipline to take a little time to devote to yourself. You're going to be better for everybody in your life, everybody. It's the old put your oxygen mask on first, or you're not going to be any good to anybody. And you only can love other people if you really, truly love yourself. And how many people out there really are lost and don't even know who they are? How can you deliver for other people? You have to learn to love yourself. And again, we're just not taught this. We're not given a tool set for that. We're given tool sets to go make a bunch of money. And we're taught that if we have all these things and all these wonderful pieces to our life that are luxurious, then happiness will be there at the end of the rainbow. But life can change on a dime. Somebody gets sick or you get sick, heaven forbid. None of those things that you've wasted and spent all this time doing are lasting. You are what is lasting. So make the investment in yourself and get to know yourself.
And I think that we're taught to prove ourselves, not love ourselves. And that's like a really
what a great line.
Yeah, I just came up with that.
I want to write.
All right. Right. Mally, this has been so good and I want to honor your time, but I like to finish with one last question. Cause I feel like we could make this like if you had more time, we'd probably make this into like 4 episodes, but, so my final question though is what is one lesson you feel like you're in the middle of learning currently?
Well, I think right now, currently, because it goes back to kind of these last couple evenings, is to manage. I think it's always an upgrade for me. Manage my time more wisely. And it's not just because I'm older, but just how precious every hour of the day is. And am I again, I always have to go back and reassess. Like you, I love what I do. I love all my people that are part of my life and my work. But yet, how much of my waking day am I giving to that piece versus my family? And, I have this new little granddaughter that I want to spend so much time with. And in the beginning of COVID, we didn't because everybody was careful. And probably one of the signs and gifts I had yesterday was I stayed downstairs in the studio working all day. And then my daughter came for a pop in visit. But because of my commitment downstairs with people, that I couldn't come upstairs to even see her or hug her. And at the end of my day, I was trying to hurry and I got up here and I'd missed her. And that really is probably what began to churn inside me last night. And I thought, I've already changed so much. But I thought, no, there's still a little more change to make sure you do. And so, how that time management for me right now is, I'm going back and repeating it and going back and refining it and finding a way to a solution. We don't have to give it all up. We just have to balance it. So it comes back to balance, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, you've taught me so much about balance. Like that's really what we're always working towards it. Right. And it's a lot harder than we think for sure. Yeah. And I think even with the change aspect of, it's so funny because I find myself saying this a lot. Like it's almost this feeling of like, okay, like I've already made so many changes. Like, isn't that enough? Right. And it just, again, we don't get to say when it's enough. We just get to keep being disciplined, being obedient, realizing that when it's not working, keep making the changes that are necessary. And one day it'll all pan out. So yeah. Mally, thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, this was like I said, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. And I just love you and your wisdom. And thank you for sharing it with all of us because you are just such a light in this world that's so needed. And you have been such a huge mentor to me and just like making so many changes in my own life and how I look at things. And I will forever be grateful for that. So thank you for being here. If anybody wants to kind of get in touch with you, like how can they go about that? Like just through your email, through your website?
Yeah, the website has my phone number up there. It has my email, and it's pretty easy to remember. The name of the studio is Awakenings because we're all awakening. And that's the time we live in. So easy to remember, but it pulls up under the domain of Best Sedona Yoga. So, and I am happy to go on there and look and see. And if I can be of service in addition to Stacy, I'm honored to. So
yes. And please, if you're ever in Sedona, go see Mally at her yoga studio is in her backyard. It's the most beautiful, serene, amazing place that you have created. And it's just, go see her, check her out. Your life will be forever changed in a good way, no matter what. So thank you, Mally. Welcome to the Evolve Beyond Limits post show. After that conversation with Mally, there's about 14 million things running through my head because after every time I speak with her, she brings things to light. And I think that the one thing I hope you took a lot from this, but one of the things that I really want you to take away from this is at the very end, she spoke about the fact that the inner changes is what matters. And I think that it's such a skipped piece of the puzzle. And actually, over the last couple of weeks, I have been asked this question so often of where do I start? Like, what do I do to start to make those inner changes, to start to understand myself, to start to make the changes that I know I need to make in my life? And, the number one thing, like Mally said, is that there is nothing outside of you that is going to give you the clarity that will come from getting to know yourself really, really well. And we just aren't taught how to do that. And I know from my personal experience that I went through that process on my own, and it's hard, right? Like it's hard to do the inner work. It's hard to be committed to doing it. It's hard to make it a priority. And the first thing that you have to do is be willing to spend some time with yourself Be willing to look at the shadows. Be willing to open yourself up to change and being vulnerable, and maybe trying some things on that don't feel quite as natural, right? But their change doesn't happen without some sort of discomfort. So the first thing you have to do is be willing to spend time with yourself, right? It's the stillness. It is the giving yourself that time to only be with you. And this is literally exactly why I created Evolve Beyond Limits Academy, was because after my own journey through all the same things that you're feeling, I created a framework and a step-by-step process to doing the inner work. And it's so much less about gaining more knowledge. We're really good at that. We're really good at listening to the podcast, reading the books, knowing all the things that we should, quote unquote, should do. But it's more about having the tools, taking bold action, and experimenting with different ways of getting to know and understand yourself and look at life from completely different perspectives, that is going to give you and help you tap into that inner wisdom. That's why we do all of this work, is to get to our inner wisdom, because when we can function from a place of inner wisdom, we are going to have so much more clarity and confidence in ourselves, in our choices, in our life, in where we're going. And even if we don't have a flaming clue where we're going, because that is something Mally and I also talked about, is stepping into that unknown. And, one of my favorite things that I ever heard, and I've lived by this probably for the last 3 years, is jump and grow wings on the way down. Like, we don't know where we're going, but if we know ourselves really well, if we have clarity, if we have that inner wisdom, if we know how to utilize those tools, we don't have to know where we're going to know that we're on the right track. So I want to leave you with that. And I want you to think about some of those things and how much time are you giving yourself? How much investment are you willing to make into yourself? Because a lot of people are willing to invest in a lot of things that are all about the external world, right? Like we get new patios, we buy new houses, we buy new cars, we, spend money on different things that are external things. But when are we going to be willing to spend the money and invest into ourselves? Because that is what is going to change your life. And by you changing your life, that is what's going to change the world for the better. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here with myself and Mally today. I hope that you were able to just take so much from this episode. And thank you to Mally for just sharing her wisdom with all of us. And make sure that if you want to start to do some of the work, then you can join our text community, which is you just have to text Journal 2021 to 248-206-3431, and you will get journal prompts directly to your phone. So it's a great place to start, because sometimes we don't know where to start with journaling. And so prompts can be a really fun way to start to tap into some of that inner wisdom, start to understand yourself a little bit better. If you want to take a step from there, then make sure you hop on the wait list for a white light session so that we can really dive into that subconscious and see where, some of the work needs to be done. It's impossible for us to see our own blind spots. And so this is going to help you understand and figure out where are your sticking points and then how to move forward. So I'm sending you so much love and light. And until the next episode, keep evolving.